Okay, good morning, everyone. The first thing I'm going to try to do, there we go, I did it, is paste into the comments the sources that I've used for this video before we get started. So there we are. Welcome to um, short-term homeschooling. Uh, my name is Doreen Browning. I'm a veteran homeschooler and homeschool consultant, and I help parents understand the basics of homeschooling as they figure out how to make this work for their families. Right now, we're in the middle of a COVID-19 pandemic. Many traditional schools have announced that they're doing virtual only courses for the fall. Some are going to hold in person or some form of hybrid. Parents are scrambling to explore homeschooling as one of their options. In this video, live, I guess, I'm going to talk about what I've decided to call short-term homeschooling. You may not have heard that term anywhere else. I think I made it up the other day just to try to describe what I see parents attempting to do. And it seems to me to describe what I believe parents are doing in terms of homeschooling this year with the intention of their students returning back to public school. So for this talk, I'll keep my portion to about 20 minutes, and then we'll have time for Q&A at the end. If you have questions while I'm talking, please go ahead and type them into the comments. I'm going to check the comments right here and see if we've got anything. Nope, nothing yet. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And I've already put my link to the sources that I've used in the comment section. So as I said, my definition of short-term homeschooling is when parents choose to homeschool their children for a short time and intend to return their students to traditional school. As I've been talking with parents, connecting with them, what I'm hearing many of them say is that they plan to have their student return once either their school opens for in-person classes or once the parents feel the students can attend safely. They're saying perhaps they'll homeschool for a semester or a year and then hope to have their student return to school, to the school that they're in. And I just want to say to you that that is a perfectly okay plan. I am not opposed to traditional schools at all. We homeschooled our two kids from K through 12, and they always had the option of attending a traditional school. We'd ask every single year, do you want to continue homeschooling? Do you want to enroll in a traditional school? And each of them at different points in their homeschooling decided they wanted to enroll in a traditional school. One chose a charter, the other one wanted to enroll in public school. When it came down to the wire, and they were all ready to go, they'd been accepted and all that, they both decided they wanted to continue homeschooling. So my point is that I support you in whatever educational path you choose for your children. So if you're here viewing this live or seeing it as a recording, you're probably at least considering homeschooling for the short term. This is going to be a different experience for you and your student than if you were starting out homeschooling for the long term. If you are homeschooling long term, first we talk about a concept called deschooling, where you don't offer any structured learning for your student for a period of time. We typically recommend that you allow 1 month of deschooling for every year that your student has been enrolled in traditional school, and the summer doesn't count. There's a lot more information that I can provide about deschooling, but for today, I'll just say that it is essentially a way to reset or reboot the way you and your student view education. It's a very important component to successful long-term homeschooling. Some believe it's critical, even essential. If you're planning to homeschool just for the short term and want to do your best to keep your student on track with the public school scope and sequence, you may not feel you have time for deschooling. So then what? How do you homeschool and stay on track for a return to traditional school? So here's what I'll talk about today. Number one, what to expect when transferring your student back to traditional school. Number two, knowing where to find public school scope and sequence or standard course of study information. Number three, figuring out your approach to curriculum or course of study. And number four, your family's situation, schedules, resources. I want to apologize in advance. I'm holding this to 20 minutes. There's so much more that could be said on this topic, but I wanted to try and take a bit of a higher level view of it. So if you have questions, type them in the comments, and maybe we can build something out for people that will expand on this if it's what you need. Again, I'm here to meet your needs. So the first question you probably have is about your student returning to traditional school, because that is your end goal. Here are some of the questions that might be within that question. Will it be seamless? What documentation am I going to need to provide? Will the public schools just accept my word for the work my student has done? How is this going to happen? Transition to public school from homeschool may or may not be seamless. I've heard both. In North Carolina, the State Board of Education Legal Affairs website has this to say about how placement is determined when a child transfers from a homeschool setting to the public school system. The principal places the child where the child can best be served. If the parent provides test scores from a nationally standardized test or equivalent measure that are adequate to determine proper grade placement, the principal cannot require further testing for placement purposes. The system works satisfactorily, this is continuing on their site, for elementary children, but poses very real problems at the secondary level where units of credit become the criteria for graduation. So unpacking this just a bit, we learned several things. The first is that the principal of each individual school determines the student's grade level placement. This means there is no standard that applies across the board to all of the public schools in North Carolina. Every single school is different, even within a district. The second is that if parents can provide test scores from a nationally standardized test or equivalent measure that is adequate to determine proper grade placement, the principal cannot require further testing for placement purposes. So this is a key point, further testing and equivalent measure. I am not sure what equivalent measure might be, but that's one of the things that you can ask. We also learned that while this works well for elementary students, once they're in middle school and high school, placement can be difficult. And it's going to depend on how your school is structured. If we think about it for a moment, students in middle or high school may be taking electives or may take a course in 9th grade that a public school student takes in 10th grade or vice versa. And that's what in homeschooling. They may take a course earlier in the sequence or later. So while I wish I could give you a definitive answer for how your student's grade level placement will be determined when you transfer back into the public school, I really can't. What I can tell you is that the experience of homeschoolers ranges from nearly seamless to problematic when transferring to public school. Some homeschoolers will say, yes, all of the courses were counted, either as having fulfilled a grade level or for elementary school or towards graduation for secondary school. Other homeschoolers, particularly at the secondary level, have encountered issues such as having to take end of subject tests in order to get credit for graduation. So if your student is a high school student, please note that while a transferred in course may count toward graduation credit, it will not count toward the student's GPA. So is there anything you can do to maximize the possibility of this being seamless? Absolutely. The very first thing I would recommend is that before you make this decision to keep on track with the public school, contact your school. Ask them how placement will be determined if your student should transfer back from homeschool to their school. Try to have an open conversation. Try not to let it be adversarial or I've heard, why can't you do it this way? Stress that you are homeschooling as a temporary intervention with the return to public school as your goal. You'd like to make sure that you provide them with what they will need to place your student where the student is best served. So you're going to partner with them is what you're trying to do. Here are some of the questions that are a little bit more specific that you might want to ask, and you might even think of other questions too. First, who will do this evaluation? It says the principal, but is it delegated, if you will, to a guidance counselor? And what is the criteria for placement at this particular school? For elementary grades, if you can provide the results of this nationally standardized exam to determine placement, ask questions about how the results will be used. Are there specific tests that they would prefer to see? Are there any tests that they would not accept? What's the threshold for placement, depending on the scores for those tests? If the school can't provide you with answers about a specific test, you could ask questions about what tests might be considered. One administered online at home, timed or untimed, administered by a third party. If it's a test that provides a percentile rank rather than a grade level, what scores do they look for within those percentiles? Will the results of a nationally standardized exam that they will accept be sufficient for placement, or will there be other non-testing requirements? For secondary grades, how is placement handled here? Would the nationally standardized exam results be sufficient for placement? Would there be additional requirements for granting credit toward graduation for a course? And when I talk about additional requirements, non-testing and for granting credit, that might be evidence of coursework. If it's not testing related, maybe they want to see some type of portfolio of the work that you've done. So here's some other things to keep in mind. Public school systems have a lot on their plate, just like we all do, but they're working to reopen and keep students safe. Some of their staff might still be working from home. They may be fielding an unprecedented number of calls from parents. Some schools may have had very little experience with students transferring to their school from a homeschool. Be patient, but be persistent. Ask the questions. Anticipate that what you are told now may be different from what is actually required when the time comes to transfer back to traditional school. To help prepare yourself for that possibility, I'd recommend that you keep samples of your students' work demonstrating achievement and/or advancement within the different subject areas. It would be far better to have this type of evidence and support and not need it than to wish that you had kept it. Things that might fall into that category might be test results, a list of books, samples of writing, mathematics test results, projects if they did a science projects, things like that. Keep a portfolio. If you're just doing this for a year, that shouldn't be the boxes and boxes of materials that long-term homeschoolers might be looking at storing. The next thing we'll cover is where to find the North Carolina Public School Scope and Sequence, or what they're calling the Standard Course of Study. If you hope to keep your student as close to the instruction they'd receive in public school, this information may be helpful to you. It seems that the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction is currently in the process of updating and migrating their content to Google Sites, so it can be a little tricky to find this information. I've provided links as a place to start, and again, those are in the comments. The first link is a quick reference guide to the Standard Course of Study for grades K through 8. Each grade level has its own quick reference guide. They're PDF documents. The link is to a public Google Drive directory, so you can go ahead and download the directory to your drive if you'd like, or you can just print them out. When I think of quick reference guides, I think of a single page, one of those laminated things, abbreviated document, but that's not what these guides are. The kindergarten guide is 58 pages long and covers the standards for every subject that's covered in kindergarten. In order to find the Standard Course of Study information for grades 9 through 12, you'll have to consult a different site, the Standard Course of Study site. That link is also in the comments. Here you'll find each subject listed separately by grade level. So you'll have English and then grades 1, 2, 3, that kind of thing. You can then look at each subject and find information specific to the grade level standards, and it does include grades 9 through 12. So how is this information helpful to you? You might find it helpful to have in mind what the general course of study is as you evaluate a curriculum choice for the coming year, especially if you want to make sure that your homeschool will cover the same standards that are covered by the public school system. An additional resource that contains the Common Core standards that have been adopted in North Carolina and many other states, and may be much easier for you to use, is also provided in the links. I'm going to try and be honest here and say that attempting to follow the Common Core standards would make me crazy. I don't find that they're aligned with how children actually learned. They're linear. They're meant to organize topics so that they can be presented, not necessarily so they can be learned, if that makes sense. I have found that children learn better in an integrated, applied, concept mapping kind of way, where the instructor is actually the guide alongside rather than the teacher up front. The next step you might want to go through is to decide on how you're going to select educational materials. As I said, I find the standards overwhelming and even confusing. You could certainly attempt to select a variety of resources from different subject areas and evaluate them for their alignment with the Standard Course of Study. You could create unit studies based on the standards. Or if you feel like that would be too overwhelming, or maybe you're feeling risk averse, you could search for an all-in-one type of Common Core aligned curriculum. And although we say all in one, typically these packages require you to also add math and possibly a science as well. I have to emphasize that I'm not saying this is the way you should homeschool. It's one option that I believe might simplify the parents' tasks if you're planning on homeschooling for the short term. It's more likely to be aligned with Common Core standards. It is prepared for the parent. It's kind of a plug and play sort of way to homeschool, but there's no guarantee that it's a good fit for your student or your family. You may hear long-term homeschoolers refer to this type of approach as reproducing school at home because it is, in essence, taking the core of the public school program and just using different materials to present it at home. So here are some insights I'd like to share with you about doing this. The first is that there are many long-term homeschoolers that find this type of structured, pulled together for them approach to be a great fit for the parent and their students. There are many, many comprehensive programs out there to choose from. Most are faith-based, but there are also secular programs. While some of them will say their program exceeds or meets standards, you would need to ask them specifically if they've gone through the Common Core standards to make sure there's an exact fit. Some of you that are participating today or viewing later might be certified teachers. You might know whether those who choose or create or present the materials for our public schools go through the effort to make sure that every single standard is covered and met. I don't know. So I want to give you permission to not make yourself frantic trying to align with standards. The second thing that I want to share is to remind you that just because you purchase a package curriculum, you don't have to do everything that comes with it. You don't have to finish it. You can pick and choose pieces out of it that are better suited to your student. You can even abandon it completely and do something else if it's not working for your student. Remember that in public schools, they don't always cover everything in the class textbook. If your student has mastered part of the material and the curriculum has reiterations of that skill or knowledge built in, feel free to skip it. If your student is struggling with a concept, feel free to stop there and pull in different resources. Don't be tied to the curriculum. It is only a tool. Take a chance and try other tools and see how your student does. The third thing is to be mindful and observant about how your student is working through the materials. How is your student doing? Are they slogging through? If so, is it really working for them? If they're struggling, avoiding crying, being oppositional, take that as a symptom of a problem. The problem is likely goodness of fit. Consider that this program might not be a good fit for them. It's going to be up to you to figure out what you need to do and how to make changes. You don't want to spend months fighting with your child over their education. As we move through homeschooling, we are constantly evaluating the tools and resources we use. Even if it seems like a fantastic tool or resource, if it isn't working for your student, it's not that great. Most homeschoolers change up what we use frequently. A fourth thing to realize is that when your student is in school, they are one of many kids in a classroom. The teacher doesn't focus solely on them. When they're homeschooling, they're kind of under a microscope, just them and the teacher. Well, maybe siblings too, but my point is that so much more attention is focused on what they're doing than when they're in a traditional school setting. And this can be very uncomfortable. Lastly, in this section, you as a parent are going to become very aware of just what educating your student means. When they attended traditional school, you make assumptions about the materials being used, what's being taught, what's being learned. You get information in the form of seeing homework, meeting with the teachers, seeing report cards. But now, you're not only going to see more of it, you're going to realize that you are responsible for how your student is educated. You may begin to see how many choices there are that can be made, and it might get overwhelming. It does get easier. So our last section on here is making homeschooling work for your family. And I'm just about to my 20 minutes, so I am. So I'm going to try and breeze through this quickly. It's short. But the key points here are flexibility and making it work for you. Having a student involved in a traditional school means having to keep to a particular schedule. Since you're no longer tied to a traditional school schedule, you can set bedtimes, meal times, study days and times according to a schedule that meets your family's needs. Parents who are working often split schedules and may even divide up the student's education between them. One parent may enjoy reading as a special time with their child or listen to audiobooks together. It can count. One parent might enjoy math. Take advantage of the flexibility that not being tied to the traditional school schedule gives you and make this work for you. My sincere hope for each of you is that you will be able to get a glimpse of the freedom and dynamic nature of homeschooling, that you'll see how your child can really embrace and run with learning and flourish, that you'll become more comfortable with homeschooling and take some risks to relax a bit once you become more experienced. Who knows? Perhaps you'll find that you want to keep homeschooling for the longer term. So that's my bit. I don't see any comments here. So I don't even know if this is actually going out to anyone or if anyone's participating. So I will give it just a minute and see if anyone wants to comment. Go ahead. If not, I have a question that came in prior to the Facebook Live, and I'll go ahead and address that. All right. So here was the question. The question was that someone is offering to homeschool my student, and they're a certified teacher. They want me to open my own homeschool. Do I need to open my homeschool, or can they just add me to theirs? Well, you can certainly open your own homeschool, and there might be some reasons that this person wants you to do that. If they are a certified teacher, the question also included that the certified teacher is teaching their own students in their home. So if they have their own open homeschool, they may still want you to take responsibility for your students' education, for keeping attendance records, for annual testing. They may want you to go ahead and do that. And that would be reasonable then for you to have your own open homeschool. You are still in charge and responsible. In this COVID situation, we don't know sometimes what's going to happen. What if this instructor has to close their own homeschool? Yours would still be open and your student would still be enrolled in your homeschool. So that's another good reason. Another reason that I want to caution you about is to make sure that it's just going to be their kids and your kids. And while there's a lot of concern about pandemic pods and teaching kids and homeschooling in small groups, that's not really what I want to address with this. What I do want to say is that you should do a lot of due diligence if that is the case, if there are going to be more kids, because what we end up getting into in North Carolina is our daycare laws, not necessarily homeschooling laws, but daycare laws. So if you have your own open homeschool and there's a certified teacher homeschooling her kids with her open homeschool, and then you get other families involved, there are some things that you really need to make sure that you take a closer look at. So I think that is probably it. Let me just check comments one more time. Oh my goodness, I do hope that this all went out and that we were live and that the audio and video was just fine. So if that's it, I'm going to go ahead and sign off, and you can put comments in later. You can private message me. You can get in touch other ways. So thanks for coming today. Thanks for tuning in. Hope it was helpful. Bye-bye.